Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Raymond Yeung. Here are tonight's top stories. Officials identify sites where a new type of public housing can be built. John Lee goes on air and to the Legislative Council to expand on his policy address. And Hong Kong's jobless rate keeps falling, while the Hang Seng Index sinks to a 13-year low. The government has dismissed calls for a reduction in stamp duties for properties. This comes as officials identified 6 locations where homes under a new housing scheme could be built. Janice Low reports.
A day after the chief executive announced that he will roll out the light public housing scheme to shorten waiting time, officials refute that they have already eyed 5 to 6 locations. Most of the sites are in the new territories and include government land and plots which private developers will hand over temporarily. They are now studying the feasibility of building light public housing in those locations. Although the government is determined to speed up housing delivery, it made it clear that community isolation facilities will not be used for the new scheme. A non-governmental organization suggested converting quarantine venues into transitional homes.
The current facilities at Kai-Tak or Panic Bay, they are devoted for the purpose of community treatment or quarantine centers, so that remain the current intention. So for the time being, there's no intention for diverting those units for the purpose of light public housing.
The property sector, meanwhile, is disappointed that the government is not relaxing stamp duties, which were introduced in the past decade to deter speculators when home prices were soaring. Although property prices have fallen in recent months, the financial chief said they remain high, but transactions have dropped. Paul Chen said the government will continue selling land by public tender, which he described as effective. Janice Low, HKIBC.
A day after delivering his first policy address, Chief Executive John Lee was busy taking questions about his blueprint. He went on air to answer queries and listen to suggestions from the public before facing lawmakers. Joanna Ho reports.
Many of the callers to a joint radio phone-in program today questioned Chief Executive John Lee on housing. In his maiden policy address yesterday, Lee unveiled a scheme to help bridge the supply and demand gap for public rental housing. According to sources, 1,000 flats under the new light public housing scheme are expected to be completed in 2024. Asked whether construction can be further speeded up, Lee said the building time has already been compressed as much as possible by using the modular integrated construction method. A woman who does not qualify for public rental housing and cannot afford a private sector flat asked why the home ownership scheme wasn't covered in the policy address. Lee said although he has delivered his blueprint, the government will continue to listen to different suggestions. Later in a question and answer session in the Legislative Council, the DAB's Gary Chan asked whether the waiting time for public rental units can be further shortened. Lee aims to slash the waiting time from 6 years to 4.5, but the Housing Authority earlier promised a 3-year wait on average.
The reality is, to build flats for the community, we need land for various reasons. It takes time for turning land from primitive nature to spade-ready sites. Now, it takes time for us to amend various procedures, but we should not ask them to wait. Of course, the shorter the better, and we will continue to work hard.
Roundtable lawmaker Michael Tian expressed disappointment that the address didn't mention a 0+0 system for inbound travelers. Lee replied that he considered all sectors of Hong Kong and doesn't want measures to go back and forth because of changes in the pandemic situation. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
The government has defended its decision to attract top-notch talent to Hong Kong. Some critics said the chief executive's policy address only focused on importing expertise instead of retaining local talent. But Deputy Chief Secretary Cheuk Wing-hing noted that it's common for people to come and go. He said it is crucial to show locals that Hong Kong is livable and the situation is improving. Cheuk pointed to its advantages, including healthcare and education, which he said are often overlooked. He added that the SAR is the only city in Asia which has 5 universities listed among the world's top 100. Hong Kong's COVID cases have risen slightly from yesterday. There were 5,433 new infections, including 335 imported ones. 9 more patients died from the virus. Officials also detected the city's first case of the BA.4.6 variant. Overseas, there's more drama in British politics as Prime Minister Liz Truss faces escalating calls for her to resign. There was also turmoil in the chamber, with an opposition MP claiming that ruling party lawmakers were bullied into voting for the government side on a controversial issue. Winner Wong reports.
Liz Truss was mocked and heckled by opposition lawmakers during her first question session since the mini-budget fiasco.
Mr. Speaker, I have been very clear that I am sorry and that I have made mistakes. But the right thing to do in those circumstances is to make changes, which I've made, and to get on with the job and deliver for the British people.
A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title? To say she's sorry. What does she think people will think and say? That's all right, I don't mind financial ruin, at least she apologised.
There was also drama over a Labour Party anti-fracking motion. The opposition said the vote, which sought to reinstate a shale gas fracking ban that Truss lifted, would be treated as a confidence motion in her government. It failed to pass, but Labour MP Chris Bryant demanded an investigation after claiming to see the government bullying and manhandling backbench members into voting in its favour. Meanwhile, at least 7 Conservative MPs publicly called on Truss to step down. This follows the resignation of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who was immediately replaced by former Cabinet Minister Grant Shapps. The party's powerful 1922 committee is set to meet tonight to discuss the next steps. An opinion poll shows that Labour has a 36-point lead, indicating that the Conservatives could face unprecedented losses in a general election. Winna Wong, HKIBC.
Hong Kong's jobless rate has dropped for the 5th consecutive period. Further improvements are expected if COVID remains under control and economic activity picks up. Chloe Fong reports.
Boosted by a relaxation in quarantine measures and a resumption of business activity, Hong Kong's labor market improved further. The unemployment rate for the period between July and September fell to 3.9%, down slightly from the 3 months to August to reach its lowest level since February. But the latest figures fell below market expectations. The number of people out of work dropped to 155,300. Total employment, meanwhile, increased by nearly 20,000 to about 3.6 million. The consumption and tourism-related sectors saw the jobless rate falling to 5.8%, while that of the food and beverages industry declined to 6.2% and retail 5.7%. There were also significant improvements in the decoration, repair, and building maintenance sectors. The latest data came as the chief executive pledged a global search for expertise, amid complaints that not enough is being done to retain local talent and improve working conditions. Looking ahead, Labour Chief Chris Sun said the recovery will depend on the extent of a further revival in domestic economic activity. While a stable epidemic situation and the second batch of consumption vouchers could offer a boost, Sun warned that they could be offset by tighter financial conditions. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
Hong Kong stocks have fallen to a 13-year low, with the Hang Seng Index losing 1.4%, but above its lowest level for the session. The benchmark continued its downturn from yesterday, dropping to nearly 16,000 points before edging up in the afternoon. The V-shaped rebound followed speculation that the mainland could shorten its quarantine period. Aviation shares skyrocketed, with state-owned Air China leading the rally, gaining 3.3%. But some travel-related shares retreated. Trip.com gave up over 4%, and Tongcheng Travel was down nearly 9%. Tech shares remained under pressure, with Alibaba, Baidu, and NetEase falling to record lows since they were listed. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index ended down by 231 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent lost $11.60, Meituan down $3.70, while Alibaba lost $2.80. Wuxi Biologics was down $4.50, while JD.com was down $6.40. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, the euro's at 7.7, the pound sterling at 8.83, while the Australian dollar at 4.95. Over in Europe, the London FTSE is currently up 5 points. Two giant pandas have arrived in Qatar ahead of the Football World Cup next month.
The Qatar government has built up one of the most spacious modern panda enclosure in the world. Also, we have the teams working on the way, with the pandas from China to Qatar to make sure the pandas will live a good life.
3-year-old Sea Hai was keen to get acquainted with her new home. The 70-kilo female has been given the Arabic name Turaya. She and her 4-year-old male companion, now known as Suhail, were gifted by China to Qatar. They are the first pair of giant pandas in the Middle East and will make their public debut after a 3-week quarantine. On to the weather now. It will be mainly fine and dry tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 24 and 29 degrees. More dry weather on Saturday before we see sunny intervals with some rain on Sunday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Raymond Yeung. Good evening.